So today on Nova Legends podcast, I got Brandon Nyman with me, one of my favorite kids I ever coached many years ago. I guess probably Robinson High School class of 98, 99, Brandon?
99, yeah. So it's funny you say kids because I feel old these days. So
exactly.
I was thinking, that was almost 25 years ago.
Exactly. You got to take all the compliments you can get, right?
That's right.
So Brandon, first of all, before we go back to your background, how would you describe yourself? Are you a bodybuilder or are you a weightlifter?
So I wouldn't actually put myself in either of those categories. So I would predominantly consider my style of training to fit powerlifting. Okay. So that's where you focus on three main lifts: squat, bench, deadlift. But yeah, I think my bodybuilding days and training for aesthetics quickly ended after I got married and realized I don't have to upkeep on that as much anymore. So
yeah,
powerlifting's for me.
Okay. So did the powerlifting drive your YouTube channel, or was it the other way around?
So I can let me expand on, give you some context on that. So I started my YouTube channel probably about it's 2022 now. So probably about 2009, right around the time that YouTube first really became a thing. And I was just taking a look at some of your like pre-screening questions, and I laughed to myself because at the time when I started a YouTube channel, it was very much not what it is today, where pretty much everyone and their kid, has a channel, and it's social media is like acceptable to film yourself and put yourself out there on the internet. 2009 or so, it definitely was not the case. In fact, I actually tried to hide it from people that I knew, just because I didn't want them to see the videos I was creating. And the reason I got into it at the time is I was still very into training, which I'm sure we'll talk about throughout the course of this conversation. But at the time, message boards were very popular online. It's not like we have today with Facebook and everyone can have like these chats, and like kudos to you, by the way, for all the groups that you've started, because it's really brought up some fun memories and been able for me to connect to a lot of people that I hadn't thought about in a long time.
Thanks.
But the message board thing was like pretty much everyone's way to communicate with each other somewhat in real time. It was either instant messenger or like, a forum or a group like that. And I was part of the bodybuilding.com forums. And as part of that, they had a separate thread for like weight training supplements, so like pre-workouts, protein powders, things of that, which again was still probably in its infancy around then, not what it is today necessarily. But there was opportunities to basically get free product sent to you in return for posting reviews on this message board. And I thought to myself, if I could differentiate myself in terms of, hey, not only can I log some of these reviews in text format, but maybe start to use this video format, I could separate myself and get more opportunities. And that's how it started. So I started making supplement reviews on YouTube. And again, today it seems like we take it for granted. You want to know something, you go on YouTube, you search it or you Google it, you get an answer, you watch a quick video, you know how to do it. 12, 13 years ago, that wasn't so much the case. So I started making those videos because there wasn't any at the time. And it started to gain a little bit of a following where people said, in addition to what you're using for supplementation, what does your diet look like? What does your training look like? And it kind of just dominoed from there, where I just started expanding the videos and the content that I created to now where it stands, where the majority of the people that follow me, I think, watch my channel for equipment reviews. So getting into like, what am I going to buy for my home gym, especially in these COVID times where a lot of people's gyms were shut down, but trying to figure out what to buy, because, gym equipment isn't something like a TV where you go into Best Buy and you can, see before you buy or whatever. Or it's not like Amazon where you just ship it right back if you don't like it and you don't have to worry about return shipping fees. With some of this gym equipment, you're talking about stuff that weighs like thousands of pounds potentially. And it's like you buy once and you're stuck with it because chances are you're not ever going to ship it back. So I think that's kind of where my audience lies now, but it has evolved from supplement reviews to diet to training to, which I still do a lot of training stuff, but a lot of it these days is more equipment focused.
Because I saw a lot of the early videos, and I remember you doing a lot of training. And so, are you like a certified coach? Did you have a lot of coaching yourself, and you felt comfortable enough to teach people how to do it, or were you just kind of like, well, this is what I do, and if you want to follow me, you're more than welcome?
Yeah, I think early on, I tried to be more of an educator, right? Like, hey, here's these different things. Here's the research behind it. Here's the good and the bad. And at the time, again, I was kind of one of the early adopters to the platform. So I was one of the few voices out there talking about that. And now there's people, with their PhDs specifically in, whether it be exercise science, whether it be nutrition. So I try not to focus on those as much these days because there's a lot smarter people out there. I've always kind of taken the approach of, hey, this is what I do. This is what works for me. This is what hasn't worked for me. And kind of, in a way, dumb it down for some people, because there's a lot of information out there and a lot of it is not good, even though there's a lot of research and scientific stuff to back stuff up. A lot of people just kind of try to fall towards the magic pill to fix everything. And they're looking for some of these easy answers. And it's probably one of the reasons why the fitness industry is so big, because there's a lot of ways to make a quick buck off of people who aren't well informed. So I've just tried to take that approach. Like, hey, look, I work a full-time, corporate job, which a lot of people don't do these days that make YouTube videos for, as at least in the frequency that I do. I'm a dad. I have a lot of other stuff going on. So like, I try to say like, this is what I do. This is how I balance stuff. And I think people can find that more relatable versus someone whose job is to be like a fitness person per se.
Great. So Brandon, earlier you were talking about products that you may review. Do the makers of these products come to you and want you to review them, or do your listeners and your viewers want you to review them? How does that work?
Yeah. So early on, it was very much me driving the train, right? It was me reaching out to companies saying, hey, look, here's what I'm doing. I'd love to be able to showcase your product, give some feedback on it. But over time, I feel like the supplement market in general, and still true today, is very oversaturated with stuff. And to be honest, there's not a lot new in the industry over the course like 10 years. So it's just more, hey, fancy marketing, whatever. So I do get a lot of supplement companies that reach out to me and say, hey, we'd love to like send you some stuff. Could you do a video? We can set you up with an affiliate and all this stuff. And I do have people who say, hey, can you try XYZ, or what's your opinion? And to be honest, I've tried to separate myself from that a little bit, just because, like, as I said, it's pretty saturated and there's a lot of stuff out there that's kind of just filler and junk. And if you do your research, and there's a ton of videos that I've done, there's a ton of information that's out there. There's probably like 5 or 6 things that are proven and actually do something. And they're not quote unquote sexy stuff. It's stuff that, you're still going to have to work. You're still going to have to give it time and whatnot. And the results that you get probably aren't going to be something that's super noticeable in the span of a short time, or even in some cases, a long time. Like some of the most popular things out there, like creatine monohydrate, which, I started taking when I was in my senior year of high school. It's something that's probably one of the most proven supplements, but even that, it's such a low return on investment that for a lot of people, they just get frustrated because they expect basically taking something to be that magic pill that I've said before to get like overnight results.
Yeah, I never heard of creatine before. And I was refereeing a basketball game, and you changed with your partner before the game, and this dude, he just took his shirt off, and he was like Hercules. And I'm like, dude, what's going on with you? He said, yeah, I've been taking these creatine pills because, when they evaluate referees, if you have like big biceps, I guess people actually care. It's craziness. But that's the first I ever heard of that. That was like maybe 15 years ago or so.
But it's funny you mentioned that, because our mutual friend, Josh Burton, who you also coached and was my year, he referees now up here on the Cape, and he does a lot of like D3, D2, whatnot. But I always give him a hard time for being a ref. And he always tells me that, you would be a great ref because you have the look that people want for referees. So it's funny that it's that, because I remember in high school, like our referees, and no offense to anyone who may be listening who was a referee at that time, like I always remember them to kind of be like older guys and not in the best shape.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I talk to referees and they say, oh yeah, he looks great out there. He looks good. He's going to go far. And I'm like, well, does he make the right calls? I mean, and I was on the fit side of officials, but Jess Kersey, Earl Strom, all the great refs that we grew up with, they were like, little tiny white dudes with red hair, and they weren't like any kind of, athletic gods, but they got the calls right and they had the presence. But anyway, that's kind of a diversion. So Brandon, I remember about, and I've been following you a long time because I was so curious of what you're up to, because I mean, you were doing this before. Everyone has a YouTube channel now, but you were doing this a long time ago. And, like normal corporate folks didn't necessarily have a YouTube channel. So I kept saying, what is he up to? And I remember you gave this video one time, how to monetize YouTube. And I was like, what is that? What are you even talking about? So I did watch it, and I found it very interesting. When you look back on what you talked about in that video, if you remember that video, has things changed a lot in the meantime since then?
Yes, dramatically so. So during those times, I think I made those videos around like 2012, 2013. So still relatively early on. And at that time, I don't believe that YouTube was owned by Google yet, which it now is. But a lot of the revenue streams came from video views. So the way that it works, to dumb it down real quick, the too long didn't read version is you get paid literally fractions of a penny for every single view that your video gets. Typically, also, you can put advertisements within your video, which Google or YouTube will actually be the ones who place those advertisements as like a pre-screen, kind of like a preview to a movie, or in the middle of a longer video, or at the end of a video, or on the page you're watching it on. And if someone would click through that ad, you would get more revenue from that. But obviously, it takes thousands and thousands and millions of views to make any sort of revenue. But that was the main, I would say, chunk of revenue that would come into a content creator. These days, that's actually the smallest stream. So where the money comes in for most people is through affiliate programs that could be like, hey, talk about this product on your video, and we will either, pay you a flat fee to do that. So you could get paid to make a dedicated video. You could get paid to do like a 60-second integration, which in some cases, some people do really awkwardly. They'll be in the middle of a video and all of a sudden be like, and I sure like drinking these monster drinks.
Yeah.
In other cases, there's things where people get like affiliate codes. So, hey, if you buy this product and you put in my code, it'll save you a percentage off your purchase. And on the back end, I would get a kickback. Or there's some companies that just give you straight affiliate links where if you use that link from a person who made that video, there's basically a little tracker in there that says, hey, this person came to our website from this specific affiliate. We're going to then give them a commission on anything that person buys. So it uses cookies and whatnot on the back end on the internet. And then, of course, a lot of people have their own products these days. So people will sell their own shirts, their merchandise, in some cases, specific products. So it can really depend. But yeah, there's a ton of money to be made. And it's interesting because this last year, I actually made quite a bit more than my full-time corporate job that I've been doing for almost 20 years on just like what I still consider like a side hobby. So there's a lot of potential revenue, which is, I think, a lot of reason why people actually go to the content creator a full-time job, because there's definitely money to be made there.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that goes to your page and not only sees the number of subscribers you have, but also sees the comments in your videos. When you do any kind of video, you have all these followers that reply with real substantive type of questions, and they might add more content themselves so they know. It's kind of a really collaborative community that you've created. But you could tell, and it's just make sure I get it right. It's Basement Brandon on YouTube, right?
Yep.
Okay. You can tell you have quite a megaphone. You've created this. It is a powerful platform that you've created. That's what I was looking for, platform.
Yeah, it's been a real interesting ride, because again, like I don't consider myself like an influencer, which is a term that gets thrown out for a lot of people that make videos. Because again, I'd mentioned already, work full time. I'm a dad. I do other stuff. This is just something I do as a hobby because I like training anyway. So I just film a lot of it, talk about equipment that I buy for my own gym. But it's interesting now because I'm at the point where I have companies that come out to me specifically who want to collaborate and make equipment together. So like I have a product that we made with Rogue Fitness, which is one of the bigger suppliers out there, where I get commissioned based off who buys that. I have other companies that come and want me to consult on equipment that they're making, like barbells or whatever. So it's interesting because I don't think of it like that. Like, oh, I do have some influence in the industry, but at the same time, like, I think of myself as the person who just sits there, and I like gym stuff. I like talking shop, so to say. So like people will send me, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Here's my space. Can you help me recommend me like a gym build? And there's probably like a full-time position just there where you're like just a gym consultant for people at home these days, because the market is huge. Again, especially with COVID and people noticing that they can actually train from home and make it successful, and see some of the benefits of training at home versus, driving 45 minutes to a commercial gym and having to wait in line to use equipment or whatever the case may be. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Yeah, well, I do this local sports podcast, as you know, and I've been surprised. I'm out and I'm recognized, And so people will come up to me and talk about certain videos or thank me. It's been, it's been really cool. And I can only imagine with your audience, it'd be even that much more, even though it's probably spread throughout the world. Do you ever think that, I can do much more, make more money if I did this full time? I know the challenge in America is always health benefits and other things that you don't want to give up in retirement. It's not like we live in Europe and those things are more guaranteed. But do you ever consider that?
So I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's the conversation I have when people say, oh, you should do this full time. And I'm the type of like, hey, number one, I like my job. Like, I think corporate America gets a bad rap. And I think if you're towards the bottom rung of whatever position or whatever industry you're in, then that could be the case. I've been lucky enough to have some really great opportunities with my own work career that I really enjoy what I do. But then again, there is more consistency in terms of, hey, I get paid vacations. Hey, I get healthcare. I get other benefits for my family versus YouTube. While this year was great, who's to say next year is going to be as great? I think we're in a time where it's not as consistent, and I don't want to have to rely necessarily on being a salesman, so to say, for that job. Because again, that's something I enjoy doing and I don't have to worry about it. I do it and it's profitable. But I think if it were to turn into a full-time gig, I think I would give me a lot more anxiety about, hey, I got to make sure I do X, Y, Z, versus right now, it's just like, hey, if I have time, great. If not, doesn't matter whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, when people ask for advice on, I want to get started, I want to start a YouTube channel or be an online personality, how do you advise them in terms of content? Like, for example, you happen to pick a area where you're passionate about, you enjoy it. So it's not like work to you. You'd probably do it anyway, even if a lot of money wasn't involved. Or do you say to them, well, you got to see what the opportunity is. What's the niche? You got to find something that's hot or people are interested in. What kind of advice do you give to people about content?
Yeah. So as far as that goes, it has to be something you're interested in. And I say that because fitness is actually a relatively small niche when it comes to YouTube. Like, some of the bigger ones are gaming. So like there's like Twitch, which is like dedicated streaming gaming. Makeup and stuff is huge on YouTube, which I could probably use, but it's not something that I know much about.
That's
like,
the next stage, right? You turn 50.
Yeah. Like toy videos and stuff, some of these, cause I have 2 kids right now, 4 and 2, and they're like, they go on YouTube sometimes and they find these random videos of songs that have like, hundreds of millions of views. And I'm like, I'm doing something wrong here. But the advice I give to people is usually 2 things. Because a lot of people, when they say that they want to start a YouTube channel, one of their first questions is about, what kind of equipment do I need in terms of what camera should I buy? What microphone do I need? What lights? And I tell them, don't buy any of that. I say, use your cell phone. Most cell phones these days are good enough where they have a 1080p camera. They have some sort of image stabilization where it's not going to be too shaky. And you probably already have it. So you're not going to have to invest anything. And I say that because it leads to point number 2, which is you just have to be consistent and patient. And biggest reason for that is it's going to take time to grow your channel for the most part. Like, there's some oddities that people that go viral overnight and they just explode in growth. But in most cases, someone's probably going to be making videos for a year or 2 with probably little to no return on it. So it doesn't make sense to invest all this money if it's not something that you for sure know you're going to stick with. But also, number 2, you have to be patient because it's just not going to happen. You have to be realistic, right? We're not all Michael Jordan, right? Some people have to practice and try and do all this stuff. And that's the case with YouTube that I found, especially now, because again, it's so saturated. As we've already said, everybody has a channel these days and it's harder to be discovered, so to say. So being an early adapter really helped. But you just have to be passionate about the subject you're talking about, because chances are you're only going to be talking to a relatively few amount of people initially. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that has helped me, so I guess I'll kind of give this a 2B, if you will. You mentioned earlier that, you see some engagement and stuff on my channel. And that's one of the things I've always tried to emphasize is if someone writes a comment or has a question, I always make sure I respond. So that's kind of like my thing. Part of it is just like OCD, like I don't want to leave anything unanswered. But if someone's going to take the time to watch a video and ask a question, it's like the least I can do. It takes 30 seconds to write a response or just say thanks. And I think that has helped me grow, because in turn, I have those people that support me for the long haul. I've had people watching me for over 10 years, and they tell their friends, or they leave comments on other videos and say, hey, you should check out Brandon's channel because he answers this in one of his videos. So that's really helped, but it's definitely not something for someone who's impatient, because it does take time in order to kind of get up and running.
Yeah. What other content do you think you could have been an expert or successful in, or maybe you're still looking at it? Are there other things that you think you could have done?
So in some cases, in terms of YouTube, I actually get a lot of questions about, because as I said, this is kind of a hobby. I don't have a ton of free time for videos, especially now. Like when I was a younger man and when I was not married and I didn't have kids, I could probably get out like 3 or 4 videos a week. These days, I'm lucky if I get like 1 or 2 a week, and they're probably, I don't put as much time into them in terms of filming and editing that I used to. So I've tried to get really good about just doing stuff in one take and just kind of getting through. And that way I don't have to worry about a bunch of edits, a bunch of jump cuts or whatever. And I think that's transferred to a lot of people, that they see my videos and they say, hey, you're really good at like public speaking or balancing all this stuff that you're doing. Can you give me some tips? So it's almost like people just need to be taught how to better manage their time and how to be efficient with the time that they have. And that kind of relates to what I do for my full-time profession, right? So I usually tell people that I'm in corporate training. And what that means is learning and development, adult education type. And it's always been on the technical side. So coming out of college, I worked for a company that did basically power racks and cooling for data centers. I then took an opportunity doing training for a company that was a small startup doing business class wireless internet. Then I'm in my current role now, which I've been in for like 10 years now, which is on the networking, I'm sorry, not networking side, but the storage side of the house. But you have to deal with people from all around the globe. So, dealing with people who English might not be their first language, might be people who are brand new to industry that don't have much knowledge. But on the flip side, you'll have people that probably speak a lot better than I do in English. And also people that are a lot smarter than I am and have a lot more industry experience, whether they come from a competitor or whatever. So being able to kind of adapt to your audience and being able to get points across and communicate, I think goes over really well. So I think if I wanted to do something like that, I might be able to. But again, it's not something that really interests me. There isn't something that really drives me in that sense.
Yeah. Well, it's funny is that if I would have described you as a high school athlete, you're really good player, played hard, never complained, a winner, clutch player. But I wouldn't have described you as the most outgoing guy I ever met. You're always very respectful and nice. I talked to your mother probably more than I talked to you. By the way, how's she doing?
She's doing great.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Her and my dad are up north with me, so
Oh, awesome.
They live in the dream.
Oh, great. But I wouldn't have described you as particularly outgoing. And your online presence is very outgoing. Is that something that you worked on, or is just like a natural progression?
Yeah, I think so. So in high school, I don't think it's a surprise to say necessarily, because I've known you, that I was really shy in high school. I think basketball definitely helped me with that. But I remember like my sophomore and junior year, I was talking to one of our football players on the team, and he was talking to me, and he's like made a comment. He's like, "Why do you always like look away or look down when I'm talking to you or when I see you in the hall?" And I'd never picked up on that. Just one of those things that I guess I'm just wired, not confrontation, and typically somewhat quiet on the other end. I tell my wife now it's just because our in-laws are so loud that I never get a chance to talk. But I think it also just depends on the topic, right? Like if it's something that I really have something to say, then I think I would expand upon that. But yeah, I think in high school, it definitely was something that I needed to work on. And I think through my jobs, what I've had, where you have to get up in front of groups of people and talk, and also talking in front of a camera is really, really awkward, especially when you're not talking to an actual person. So like Zoom calls are one thing that can be somewhat awkward, but if you're just sitting there in a room with a camera on and trying to talk and engage people, it's something that I think is an actual skill. And a lot of people are turned off by it, or, they think they're not good at it. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. But over the course of, 12, 13 years, I've probably made 1,200 videos. And I think it's just like, even if I go back and look at some of my old ones, I cringe because I am more monotone. I am more robotic and stiff. But I think just with practice and with anything, you just get better at it. So it's it's been a blessing because it's helped with my normal day-to-day life and my corporate job as well.
So Brandon, did you play football also? I know you.
I did not. So Coach Boyer talked me out of it. I was very close to playing my senior year. And it was one of those things where I always thought I'd be good at, because I always considered myself stronger, which kind of ties into why I love training still these days. But at the time, I think it just didn't make sense to play football so late, as I'd never really played organized football before. I was going to my senior year and I was hoping to play basketball in college still. So it just didn't make sense to kind of make that leap. And I wonder about it still sometimes these days, right? Like, what if? But at the same time, with everything that's come out with football and potential injuries, and I see a lot of my old high school buddies who, they didn't play maybe beyond high school or college, but like they're in a little bit of rough shape. So I think it might have been a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Do you think about those basketball matchups? Now, you came along, and for any of your listeners who may not know this, you played Northern Virginia. My listeners will definitely know. But in the mid to late 90s, we had a very high talent pool. And you played in your district was very tough. The West Potomac was tough. TC Williams was tough. I mean, every night, there was no nights off. Do you still think about those matchups? And how did they form the person that you are today?
Yeah, I think so. Playing basketball for me was a great opportunity because I never really considered myself good at basketball initially. So I think altogether in my total basketball career, I think I played maybe 6 years of organized basketball. So one being in like 7th grade and then 9th, obviously through senior year. And then I played a little bit my freshman year in college. So it gave me a lot of confidence, especially going up with like those Northern Virginia teams, like you said, were tough, especially like our team. So even like our day-to-day practice, my junior year, I was lucky enough to start on a team that I think we were ranked at one point in the top 5 in the Washington Post early on. So we had some big wins against like Rob Anderson and Wakefield and whatnot. And like Braddock at that year was really
Chris
good
Isaacs,
as well.
Was Chris on that team?
Yeah. So Chris was a senior that year. So that year, myself being around 6'3", maybe 6'4" on a good day, I think I was the shortest person on the starting 5 because we had myself. We had Sean Jackson, I think that went on to play at Grambling. And I know Sean's in the group. We had Eugene Mitchell, who was also like an awesome defensive end on our state championship football team. Chris Isaacs.
I think he was all Met football player, wasn't he?
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Big, scary guy. Chris Isaacs. And then we also had Chris Hernandez, who also played on the football team that year. And I think he went to actually like to play football in college, even though he only played like 1 year of high school football. I think he went to like Air Force or Coast Guard Academy or something like that. But they're all like our starting lineup. Like I was like I said, the shortest guy at like 6'3", and also the lightest person at like 190 pounds. All those guys weighed like, 200, 220. They were big, they were fast, they were strong. So that helped me just get ready for the Northern region and the onslaught that was the Patriot District at the time.
Was Kevin Kiley on that team?
Kevin Kiley was. So that was the last year he played. That was one of the things that kind of set us back. I think our senior year is there were some issues where we didn't have a lot of the senior players, especially those on the football team, come over. So my senior year, I think we only had like 3 or 4 seniors and everyone else was underclassmen. Yeah.
That was a very tough team for me to coach because Chris Isaac was a good player, but he didn't like to listen to advice very much. He knew everything. And then Kevin, he wasn't a team player. So he was a fine athlete, but he wanted to be the man on the basketball court. And he just had the skill level to do that. So he could have been a very effective player if he wanted to, but he wasn't interested. And then his mom and dad were always, and I'm just a summer league coach. Mom and dad were always working me, but you really got to give Kevin a second look. And, again, I like the kid, but he just didn't fit in. And then I think Deshaun Eccles was on that team.
Yep.
He didn't listen either. So I remember that team was very talented. Gene Mitchell was great. Sean, who I love, he didn't listen either. Good player also. So I couldn't wait till those guys graduated because the next year, your senior year, we had Josh Burton who'd been on the JV. We had a bunch of guys that just wanted to play hard. And was that Brad Anderson on that team? Was a sophomore?
Yeah,
maybe?
Brad Anderson, Bahar El Jabali, who ended up playing at JMU.
That was my favorite summer league team I've ever coached. I mean, we were really good. I don't think we lost very many games. And it was funny because I don't think anyone thought we were going to be good because everyone had the name players had graduated.
Yeah, so my junior year was great for me because like you said, we had a lot of good people and all I had to do was set screens and rebound, which made my job very easy. I wasn't asked to do much else, which was fine with me because that gave me a spot because not a lot of people want to go there and, set screens, get rebounds, take charges. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I got so much playing time my junior year. And then senior year, I had a little bit of a snafu where I probably thought I was a little bit more Steph Curry when I should have been a more Draymond Green type. Because again, we had Brad Anderson, who was a great shooter. We had Behair coming off the bench, who great shooter as well. Yeah. Mike Rowson, like a 6'7" dude who liked to play on the wing, great guy. And then Josh, we had a really good potential that year, I think, but like Josh ended up blowing out his knee in soccer that spring previously. But I got to say, out of my whole basketball career, I was thinking back on this coming up to this talk with you. I think some of my favorite times were those Flint Hill Summer League teams that you coach, because those were fun. You were probably one of the first and only people who encouraged me to get out and shoot some threes at the time, and I was like, this is great. Julian's the best. And it was always fun playing with you. So I really appreciate the time and effort that you put in, because I know looking back on it now, it's like, how did you find the time? How did you end up doing all this and dealing with all those personalities and divas that are your 16 and 17-year-old boys growing up?
Well, some kids and some groups are better than others, but I always believed, especially in the summer when the games don't mean quite as much, if you tell kids they can do something, they'll be able to do it. You just got to give them the belief in themselves. And a lot of kids, they don't have that belief. Some kids like Kevin Kiley might believe a little too much, and you may have to do a little adjustment, even though, again, Kevin's a great athlete. But generally, kids need to believe that. If you believe you can make that shot, and Boyer was like that too. But it's just harder during the regular season sometimes to, when the games mean a whole lot, someone's got to go in there and do the dirty work. So which is why, I love coaching in the summertime. So anyway, so you didn't end up playing football. Oh, real quickly, how did you deal with like the intimidating types in the district, like the Willie Piles, end up playing in the NFL in the CFL? Great guy. There was, every team kind of had, West Potomac had another guy that was Tyree, was always up to something. You had a lot of personalities. How'd you deal with all those kind of strong personalities in the district?
So I would probably, and it's funny because, so I went to Randolph-Macon College my freshman year, and I'll come back and we'll make a point, I promise. But so one of Randolph-Macon's alum was Mark Martino, who coached at Lake Braddock during the time that I was there. And it's funny because, when you're actually in it, when I was in high school, it's like, at least for me, it's like I viewed everyone as like an enemy, right? Like during a time like the NBA, that's like when you had like the Knicks and the Heat, they'd always get in fights and it was very physical. And that's how I always tried to play. And I didn't have many friends that were outside of Robinson. So in other circles, I think probably if I had done more organized basketball, I probably would have had, more friends that ended up being on other teams and whatnot. It's more friendly. But I went into those games thinking like, hey, I'm going to go out there and try to kick somebody's ass. And it's funny because getting back to the Mark Martino point, he's like, man, Diamond, he's like, you're the dirtiest player in the Northern region. I started laughing. And it's because it's just one of those things. It's like when I wanted to try to set a screen, like I wanted to try to set good screens. Like that was where I made my living, and like under the rim trying to get rebounds. So it gets scrappy down there. And like, I remember one time we were playing Westpot and you mentioned Tyree. He was coming off a screen, kind of like Reggie Miller used to do, and like run around the baseline to the other side of the three. And he came around and I just went and stuck my hip right in him and took him out. I got called for a foul, of course, but like I wasn't the most athletic player. Yeah. So I always tried to be as technically efficient as I could, but also kind of get in the stuff that I could get in and try to get under people's skin a little bit. Because I knew that's where I would make more of a difference than, let's say, scoring a bunch of baskets, which wasn't my strong point. So I think I went in that mindset, to get to your answer, of trying to be annoying. And I think that worked out well for me, because again, I did things no one liked to do, just box people out, set screens, and it worked out well for me. I can't complain. I think I had when I look back on it, I can't say that I didn't do anything I didn't want to do.
Well, as you know, Coach Boyer likes, Dave Boyer, by the way, he likes playing mind games on the other team. My guess is Coach Boyer probably enjoyed the fact that you were doing that, because if I had to describe you, I wouldn't describe you as dirty and all. I've coached dirty players before. You always appeared clumsy enough where it would appear unintentional. So I didn't think you ever did anything that was outright dirty, but you were physical, but it always looked like it was just part of the way you moved.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I didn't try to do anything that was like, illegal or not get caught doing it. I just think it's like one of those things, like Have you ever had the case where you go and you like maybe play a pickup game and it's supposed to be just for fun, but there's that one person who takes it way too seriously, is like always on the ball guarding you, like sitting your hands in there, getting the forearm checks. Like I tried to be that guy. Like I just tried to be, like I said, annoying and up to the point where I was always in someone's face. So I think other coaches probably felt like, get this guy out of here, get him away from my guys.
So I was friends with Ted Jeffries. Ted Jeffries played at UVA, late 80s, early 90s, DeMatha guy. Hey, 6'10", great guy. So we're playing pickup after their season. We're in the gym at UVA, and I go up for a layup. He basically just almost throws me out of the gym, fouls me. He was my boy, and so it was really a hard foul. So a couple of years ago, I was talking to him about it. We're on one of these pandemic Zoom calls, and I was like, Ted, you remember that time you almost threw me out of the gym? Why did you do that? He says, well, Julian, look, you were a good basketball player, but we'd all come to the gym to have some fun. Season's over. You had to prove every moment how good you were. We already knew you were good. So you go in there, you just annoy people. So I think one day I just had enough, and I just had to throw you out of the gym. That reminds me of that story you just told.
Yeah, that's too funny.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk quickly about Randolph-Macon. What did you do there? Is that where you got serious about the weights?
Yeah, so I went to Randolph-Macon my freshman year, and it was who just, by the way, won the D3 national championship. So kudos to them. So I went there my freshman year, as well as Mike Rowson, who was also on my team that year. And we were a part of a very large freshman class and kind of a changing of the guard. At the time, Randolph-Macon head coach, Hal Nunnally, I think he coached there for like 40 some years. He retired. They brought in Mike Rhodes, who is now the coach of VCU. And he brought in a ton of freshman players. And I looked at a lot of schools in the ODAC, so all in Virginia. So like Lynchburg, Bridgewater, went on a bunch of visits there. But Randolph-Macon, I just at the time, I liked the location, outside of Richmond. It was close, like within an hour, give or take on traffic. With Northern Virginia these days, it's probably 2 hours. And I just liked the opportunity there. So I went there, and I think we had like 9 or 10 other freshmen at the time, very young team. And I think it was just a different experience for me coming from high school basketball to college basketball, especially at the D3 level. And that's not a knock against D3, but it was just a big commitment in terms of time, so like morning practice, afternoon practice, study hall. And I had just found out how fun college could be. I guess I'll put it that way. I was pretty much by the books in high school. Like I wasn't going out partying, basketball was my life in high school. And I got to college, I let that life open up a little bit, and it wasn't as much, I wasn't having as much fun playing anymore. And it probably didn't help that I ended up getting stress fractures in both of my feet. Mm-hmm. So like 2 or 3 games into the season, I was basically out and wearing like inserts in my shoes and told not to run. And it's at that time when I couldn't actually like practice where I started getting more into the gym. So kudos to Dave Boyer, because he's really big on his team and getting in the weight room. Like the freshman tryouts, he had everyone go in there and then, testing their maxes, seeing what their strength levels were at. And he was always big on getting into the gym. Robinson had a very great strength training program headed up by Mark Bendorf, the football coach at the time. I took weight training in high school my last 2 years instead of like gym or an elective. They basically have a weight training class you can take. I took that. And at the time, that was the first time in a long time where I wasn't running for basketball. And why that plays such a key role is because I was lifting and I was eating and I wasn't burning thousands of calories a day practicing all the time. I actually started putting on some muscle and I was like, hey, this is pretty sweet. This is great. I like this. And by the time I healed up, I think I was just so jaded from the basketball experience that I had freshman year that I was like, I'm just not interested in playing anymore. So I just trained to train because it was fun. And to kind of get back to one of your earlier questions for powerlifting, one of the reasons I like that aspect of training is it's still a very competitive sport where you can set competitions and go and actually test out how you've been doing. So it gives you like a goal to train towards. Whereas bodybuilding, they have competitions, they have stuff to do, but most people don't actually compete in bodybuilding because you need to get to extremely low levels of body fat, which isn't very healthy. And a lot of people are probably a bit hesitant to strap on a bikini bottom trunk, so to say, and go up there and pose in front of a bunch of people. So powerlifting just gave me that competitive outlet that I had been missing and still give me some return on. I like being in the gym. I like training. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in that regard.
Well, how did you do competitively? Were you pretty high performer in powerlifting?
So it's all relative, right? So I think if you take a look, there's like some basic standards where you can consider based off of your weight classes, which is how powerlifting is handled, similar to like Olympic weightlifting, where they can say, here's what, good is, here's better, here's like elite, here's international elite. I would say above average. I don't want to toot my own horn, but at the same time, like I have a lot of friends in the industry who like literally are like world champions. So they kind of put me to shame, and I'm not getting any younger. And I didn't really get into competitive powerlifting until my early 30s. So I've been competing for about 10 years now in actual powerlifting competitions. And it really just depends, because a lot of it's who shows up on that day in some cases. Cause so I've won plenty of meets in my weight classes, but it might've been in a class of 3 people. It might've been in a class of 10 people. So then you might have someone who's a world record holder show up for one of your meets. And one of the things I really enjoy about the sport is I try not to look at it as you're competing against other people, but you're more competing against yourself. So have you done better at a lower weight, or have you been able to put weight onto your 3 lifts, so to say, or your overall total? And that's what I really enjoy about it, because no matter your experience level or how good you are, you can always mark your own progress against yourself, which I think is great for the sport.
And do they have like masters, like over 50? Is like a
Yeah,
lifetime?
so I'm now considered a master's level lifter, although I still compete in the open class too, which is pretty much everybody. But one of the problems with powerlifting, in my opinion, which kind of relates to why it's probably not in the Olympics, is there's so many different federations and groups and weight classes. So there's Masters 1, which for me in one of the federations means you're between 40 and 49. In some other federations, it's between 40 and 44. And then there's Masters 2 and 3. And I've seen some people in some cases where you have 80-year-old guys out there, deadlifting, which is awesome, by the way. And I'm hoping I get there at some point too. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. So I actually have a competition next week, which is the Rhode Island State Championships, which if my training holds up to how it's been going, I should be able to set a couple of state records still. So that'll be good.
Wow. So what's the downside to powerlifting? Like for me, I'm a short guy. So I never wanted to get big, because I feel like as you get older, you just look fat, So I've always wanted to be thinner, because I'm naturally kind of a big guy anyway. So I've never wanted to get big, and I do push-ups and curls and stuff, but nothing big. I've never been a weightlifter, because I don't think it would look good on my frame. But generally, what do you think the downside is to doing a lot of weight training?
Sure. So first of all, let me say that I've been training since 15 or so. So I'm 41 now. So long time. I'm still not big. I'm doing something wrong. I think the downside for powerlifting, well, first of all, I think the downside to training in general, first of all, the pros always outweigh the cons. I think one of the downsides could potentially be, though, if you're not doing smart programming, there's a high potential that you could potentially get hurt.
Right.
And that's just if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know how to program. So like for me, when I program, it comes in waves. So there's heavy stuff, there's light stuff, but it's always kind of changing. That way you're never really full steam ahead all the time, because that's just not sustainable. So there is the potential of injury, which is still super, super low. Other sports are probably much, much higher. For me, the thing I laugh about with powerlifting is, for those that don't know, the goal is to basically test your 1 rep max. So the most weight you can do for 1 rep for squat, bench, and deadlift, those 3 lifts. So for the most part, a lot of your training is done in lower rep ranges, as opposed to, let's say, like training for hypertrophy, which is bodybuilding, whereas higher rep ranges and lighter weight. So maybe sets of like 10 or 12 or 15 or 20, whatever you want to do. With those higher rep ranges usually comes more cardiovascular work versus, hey, I'm training for powerlifting. I'm going to do a heavy single, then I'm going to wait 5 minutes and maybe do another heavy single. I think a lot of people, at least when I first started powerlifting, I thought of powerlifters as these big fat guys with beards that are really out of shape, but just really strong, which there is still a lot of that these days. But I think one of the things that has helped me is adding some cardiovascular stuff into it, because if you don't do that and you're into powerlifting, you could still be in good powerlifting shape and super strong, but you might get winded walking up a flight of stairs, which who wants that? So it might not be necessarily functional, which is one of the reasons I think why CrossFit and stuff does so well these days, is because anyone can pretty much do it. It's not really testing your strength as much as it is time in a lot of cases, but it also just gets people feeling better and just moving in general. So it just really depends what people are looking to do.
And do you have powerlifters like yourself do 5Ks, do triathlons, do marathons, or do you guys kind of focus on the weightlifting?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on the individual. I think what a person has to ask themselves is, what's their goal? And if their main goal is powerlifting, then it probably doesn't make sense to diversify the training that much, because it's kind of like being a jack of all trades, master of none, right? Because what you need for powerlifting is going to be a lot different than what you need to be an endurance athlete. That being said, there are a lot of people that mix it up or go in like almost like seasons, if you will, like to say, all right, this part of the year, I'm going to focus on powerlifting, then I'm going to shift gears and do this. So it depends, because I have friends that do, those endurance sports, they do marathons, whatnot. I think a 5K isn't very tough, because that's like three miles or so. And I think if you're in general shape, I could probably run a 5K right now at decent time. But again, it just depends on what you want to do. Kind of like people who say, hey, I want to build muscle and lose fat. Those are two very different ideas and require two very different things within your body. And for most people, that's never going to happen. And if you try to do both at the same time, you're probably not going to do very good at either. You might make some progress here and some progress there, but for the most part, you'd be better off focusing on one goal versus the other. So it's the same kind of thing with powerlifting. You can do it, but if it's your main attention, which it isn't for most people, I mean, even for most people that are into powerlifting, I would still say a very small percentage actually compete on a regular basis. So it just depends, like most things in life.
Yeah. Well, if I want to start powerlifting, do I have to give up my lunchtime glass of wine, or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Right. That's post-workout carbs. Right. And there's this whole subculture in powerlifting too, where like they have people that say like, donuts and deadlifts, or there's whiskey and deadlifts, or there's this whole subculture. And I think it's one of those things for sustainability, and for anything, you have to make it fun and you have to make it enjoyable. And in the sake of powerlifting, like if you're super strict with everything, like if you take it super seriously, that's cool. I have friends that do that. Like their life revolves around lifting. But for me, one of the reasons I think I've lifted so long for is because, again, it's one of those things that I enjoy doing, and it's not a job. And I don't put myself in those specific holes where I say I can only do X, Y, and Z. Now, as I get closer to a competition, if I'm going to compete, I might tighten things up a little bit, because there are weight classes and stuff to be considerate of. And you want to make sure your energy is at a high point in time. But for the most part, I mean, that's the great thing about powerlifting. You can just do a higher weight class, Julian. There's no restraints.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is great, Brandon. Well, to get back a little bit to the online or your YouTube work, what if your kids wanted to really focus on being online personalities and
Sure.
didn't necessarily want to go to college or something like that? Like, for example, my daughter, and here's my plug at being an online influencer. She makes these little bracelets, and she has a channel on TikTok, I think like 50,000 subscribers, and she just makes these little bracelets. And then she has a YouTube thing she just started. And my other daughter used to sell, I forgot what she sold on YouTube, but they always had these online little businesses that they enjoyed. How would you advise your kids who want to get into online, be an online personality?
Yeah. So for me personally, I would say I'm here to help. I'll be your cameraman. I'll be your editor. Because actually, a lot of the bigger channels that make a lot of money are kid focused. However, I've never, like, for the most part, for my content, I've always kind of excluded my wife, my kids. I don't include them. It's just my channel is about training, and that there are people who differentiate and go into that and do more of like a lifestyle type stuff. But I think that's a fair opportunity these days, where I don't like the word influencer, but I think that is an actual profession these days. Things have changed a little bit, because there is a substantial amount of money that can be made, and that can be a full-time job, and it can be very lucrative. That being said, though, kind of to the point I made earlier, it's still a case where not everyone's going to make it. Like, hey, you know what else is a lucrative job? Being an NBA player. Doesn't mean I'm going to be an NBA player. You still have to put in the work, and it's still a very small percentage of people who actually make it per se. But I would definitely, if they showed interest in that or anything, right, with our kids, I'd help them as much as I could without being overbearing. And if they backed off and didn't want to do it, that's fine. Let's move on to the next thing. To your other point about college, if they said, hey, I don't want to go to college, I want to do this, if that's their choice, then that's their choice. I'm kind of a little bit jaded on college just because I have not used my college degree whatsoever since graduating. I've done fine. I think college degrees can be valuable, especially if you're going to a specialty field, but I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in economics and I have not touched it since. I went in a completely different field in technology. And it was more of just, hey, you need to have a college degree to apply to this role, but I haven't used any of that since. So if my kids went that route, that's fine, especially looking at some of the tuition rates these days. I know your eldest son, I think, what, next year?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you kind of feel that pain too.
Yeah.
Get a scholarship, get a scholarship, get a scholarship. So.
Well, I would argue that your economics and the BS is actually, it's not easy to get one. And that just probably helped you think, and the way you approach your business or whatever, it's probably been a part of who you are without you necessarily knowing it. But, so let's talk about also, you're primarily YouTube. What are the other opportunities out for people like yourself who have a passion and they want to share and a personality? I mean, what about, like, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's Facebook. There's infinite number of vehicles with which you can use. What are some of the other opportunities that you see out there?
Yeah, so I think you named some of the big ones. And I think, unfortunately, I'm getting to that point in time where I'm getting a little bit to be in the older generation. So I do not have a TikTok, although I probably should. I have a lot of friends that do. I do have an Instagram account. I have a Twitter account. And I think for any social media, if someone's interested in doing that, you got to get your hands or dip your toes into all of them because there's different opportunities for each thing. So for me, for instance, for my Instagram, I can still monetize that and I can still get paid from that. And Instagram can be as a nice, for me, it's a sidecar because for a YouTube video, I have to film it, I have to edit it, I have to upload it. It's going to take a little bit more of a time commitment. For Instagram, I could just post a picture and write a small caption and it can still be like an appetizer. And I can use that also if I want to as a way to drive people to other platforms. Say, hey, here's a picture of this equipment I just got in. Check out the full review on YouTube. It's linked in my profile or whatever the case may be. So it still gives me a way to create content and get stuff out there in the interim of me not producing as many videos as I have in the past. I think also some forms of social media are better suited for different tasks, but it's kind of getting watered down. And what I mean by that is, for instance, like Instagram has Reels now, YouTube has Shorts now. And I think both of those are their attempt to kind of do what TikTok is doing, which is, like a minute long or whatever. Before TikTok, there was Vine. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
Yeah, sure.
There was Periscope. There's things come and go. So not everything sticks. That's why I always think, get in early. Like I mentioned, early adoption is usually the best way to kind of get your foot in the door and also to diversify. But like my friend does cooking videos, like you've probably seen some of them, where it's like sped up 2x speed, where it just shows the ingredients from start to finish. And you have a finished product in a minute of like some recipe that you could do. Like those things are perfectly suited for TikTok or something like that, because it's very short, concise, to the point versus, hey, let's make a 30-minute video on YouTube of the same process, which people probably aren't going to want to watch because most people are lazy and just want, all right, what do I need to do? Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, last question, Brandon. This has been great catching up with you. What are the future innovations you see on the online atmosphere? What do you think? What's missing? What other kind of vehicles do we need? Do you think? Do you see anything else out there?
In terms of like social media, or in terms of just training in general?
It could be either one.
Yeah. So I think right now, and again, it kind of goes in waves a little bit. I think for the social media stuff, the things that are gaining a lot of popularity right now is the streaming side of the house. So that's like 24/7 access in some instances. Initially Twitch was that vehicle for people, but you can now stream on a lot of other things. You can do Instagram lives, you can stream on YouTube. And with that, they're finding more ways to monetize, where you can have people that comment on your videos, but if they give you a donation when they comment, their comment stays on the screen longer, or you see it more. Or some influencers, I hate that term, will say, hey, you know what, if you want your question answered or whatever, you have to do a donation for it. There's paid subscriptions for certain things. I think that's where it's going more, though, is like the live aspect versus the canned aspect, so to say. And I think it's coming back around because initially when YouTube was first released, it was very raw because people didn't have the editing tools, the skills. It was just like, hey, let me film this on a camera, upload it, we're good to go. And then as those tools became much cheaper and more access became available to programs, things started to get like all cinematic and everyone tries to overproduce everything, where now they're realizing it takes a lot of time to do. And some of these videos just don't hit. So why are we going to spend all this time doing all this fancy stuff when I can just do something super simple and easy and upload it without any editing and get maybe the same return? So I think we're seeing a return to that, some of the stuff that's a little bit more simple. In terms of the training world, I think you're going to see a lot more stuff with, how do I say this? Maybe guided training, where it's kind of a hybrid of not having someone in person train you, but it's also not something that's just like a computer generated, like, hey, here's a program, just do it. So kind of similar to what you see with like Peloton and things like that. I think Peloton's model needs a little bit of work, and they're going through some issues because they overproduced actual equipment when I think people buy them for the experience, not the equipment, kind of like some of the times with like Apple, people just like the user interface and whatnot. But there's been a lot more companies coming out with stuff like there's all-in-one units that mount to a wall and has cameras that track you and stuff like that. So I think with that, like you're going to see a lot more with that online integration that's more virtual, but also utilizing a lot of things that are prevalent in today's world, like analytics, machine learning, deep learning, that type of stuff, to give people a catered result that still feels personal, when in reality it's more like machine driven.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, Brandon, that's a lot of excellent information today. Very inspirational stuff that you've been able to put this together, and it's just funny how you just started this hobby and what you've been able to turn it into while having a great professional career as well. So it's been great seeing pictures of your family on Facebook. That's a beautiful thing about Facebook for a coach, especially. You can quickly keep track of all your folks that you coach. So it's been great, keeping in touch with you, and thanks for participating, not just on the podcast, but in Facebook groups as well.
Yeah, like I said, it's been great for me. Brings up a lot of memories, and I can finally scan all these like clippings that my mom has saved over the years. I have big binders of stuff, and it's been awesome, especially in the shutdown. But also, thanks for having me on the podcast. I was telling my wife, I was like, "Oh, my old coach coming on." It's like, he said like Grant Hill and Joey Beard and all these like famous people, and then he wants me to talk about the gym stuff. So she's like, "Oh, geez, here we go." And I'm like, "That's awesome."
Well, Brandon, it's funny because as soon as you start something online, people copy what you're doing. And I'm sure you have people copy and paste Brandon. So I have found, a few podcasters kind of doing the same old, kind of like the Brian Gumbel, kind of Roy Firestone type of thing that I was doing. And so, I would talk to them and they'd say, you've had Grant Hill, you had these great people. And that's the kind of people I want. And I said, well, you think so? And it's great. And I'm flattered that Grant Hill was willing to do it. But when you're trying to create an audience, you have to remember, when you do Grant Hill, that piece competes with every other Grant Hill interview that's out there. There is so much Grant Hill material out there, so that you might get a lot of views, but I'm more likely to get Grant Hill views from folks in Northern Virginia. So it sounds great, and it is great, and it helps me get other guests. But that video itself, if I do a panel of local basketball coaches, that may get more than Grant Hill because my audience is more localized, and that's what they want to see. So and this is something you could probably identify with when you're thinking about your audience. It is great having those names, but you have to also have audience that's tailored to your local listeners or whatever your audience is. Like, for example, you may it'd be great for you to have Christy Brinkley on your show, but I'm not sure how much your powerlifting audience wants to hear from Christy Brinkley, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, that's why I've enjoyed some of your stuff too. Like, because for some of the people that you've had on, like for example, Carlos Poindexter, like I remember him from playing against him, right?
Is that right?
And like I said, like I used to hate everyone. I played especially Hayfield because they would. I think we only beat Hayfield in my whole career maybe one out of like the 10 times that we played them. So I know him from then, but now to see him as a coach and as an adult and kind of hear from him, it's been really cool to kind of, change that perspective a little bit, because I only have certain memories, and to hear from him and say certain things, it's been cool to hear.
Yeah, well, people keep telling me I should narrow my focus, and I kind of disagree, because, like, for example, there's a Robinson woman who won the Jeopardy, the Collegiate Jeopardy Championship, UVA. And I'd love to have her on. I just think it's more interesting to bring different viewpoints and different talents like yourself, because I've followed you for many years because you know exactly what you're doing. You're not that like this banger, tough basketball player that I coach. I mean, you're like a real, online genius. So it's been great to follow your progress, and and also great reconnecting.
Yeah, and that's why I can't play pickup ball anymore, because those elbows and screens don't go over so well when you're playing with other people.
You got a little too much behind those elbows and screens right now. So anyway, Brandon, look, this has been great. And thanks for doing it again. Hopefully you share that with your folks. And also make sure you tell your parents that I said hello, and maybe even share this with them.
I will, for sure.
Great.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, Brandon.
Thanks, Julian. Good catching up.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a good day now. Yep.
Bye.